please save my mom." He had no idea love was coming. The sun was setting over the dusty town of Silver Ridge, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed to stretch across the endless western horizon. Elijah Stone sat on the wooden bench outside the general store, his worn leather boots crossed at the ankles, his hat pulled low over his eyes. He had been traveling for 3 weeks now, looking for a place to call home after years of wandering from town to town, never staying long enough to put down roots. At 32 years old, Elijah had seen more of the frontier than most men twice his age. He had worked as a ranch hand, a carpenter, a blacksmith, and even a schoolteacher in a small mining community up north. But something always pulled him away, a restlessness in his soul that he could never quite name. The townspeople of Silver Ridge had paid him little mind since his arrival that morning. He was just another drifter passing through, another weathered face in a land full of weathered faces. But Elijah had noticed something different about this town. There was a peace here, a quietness that settled into his bones and made him want to stay just a little longer. He was about to close his eyes and rest when he heard the sound of small footsteps running across the wooden boardwalk. Before he could look up, a tiny body crashed into his legs, and when he pushed his hat back, he found himself staring into the tearful eyes of a little girl no older than 6 years old. Her brown hair was tangled and wild, her dress was covered in dust, and her cheeks were streaked with tears that had left clean trails through the dirt on her face. She was gasping for breath, her small chest heaving with the effort of running, and her eyes were filled with a desperate fear that made Elijah's heart clench in his chest. "Mister," she sobbed, grabbing onto his shirt with her tiny fists, "please save my mom, please, she's real sick and nobody will help us." Elijah sat up straight, his full attention now on the crying child before him. He reached out and gently took her small hands in his, trying to calm her trembling body. "Slow down, little one," he said softly, his voice deep but gentle. "Take a breath and tell me what happened." The little girl hiccuped and tried to steady herself, her bottom lip quivering as she fought back more tears. "Mama fell down this morning and she won't wake up proper. She's burning hot and talking to people who aren't there. I tried to get the doctor, but he said we still owe him money from when Papa died, and he won't come no more." Elijah felt a surge of anger rise in his chest at the thought of a doctor refusing to help a sick woman because of money, but he pushed it down and focused on the child in front of him. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked. "Rosie," she whispered. "Rosie Miller." "Well, Rosie Miller, my name is Elijah, and I'm going to help you. Can you take me to your mama?" Rosie's eyes widened with hope, and she nodded so vigorously that more tears spilled down her cheeks. She grabbed his hand and began pulling him down the boardwalk, her small legs moving as fast as they could carry her. They walked through the main street of Silver Ridge, past the saloon and the church, past the livery stable and the blacksmith shop, until they reached a small house at the edge of town. It was a modest structure, well maintained despite its simplicity, with a small garden out front that showed signs of loving care. Rosie pushed open the door and led Elijah inside. The house was clean but sparse, with simple furniture and hand-sewn curtains on the windows. In the corner of the main room, there was a bed, and in that bed lay a woman who took Elijah's breath away. Even in sickness, she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Her hair was the color of autumn leaves, spread across her pillow like a halo of fire. Her skin was pale and flushed with fever, and her lips were dry and cracked, but there was a beauty in her face that spoke of strength and kindness and a gentle spirit. Elijah moved to her side and knelt beside the bed. He placed his hand on her forehead and felt the heat radiating from her skin. She was burning up, caught in the grip of a fever that had taken hold of her body and would not let go. "How long has she been like this?" he asked Rosie, who had climbed onto the bed beside her mother and was holding her hand. "Since yesterday," Rosie said. "She was coughing real bad for a few days, and then yesterday morning she just fell down and couldn't get up no more." Elijah had seen fevers like this before, He had helped nurse sick people back to health during his time in the mining community, and he knew that time was not on their side. He stood up and looked around the room, spotting a water pitcher on the table. "Rosie, I need you to be brave for me," he said. "I'm going to take care of your mama, but I need your help. Can you do that?" Rosie nodded, her eyes wide and trusting. For the next several hours, Elijah worked tirelessly. He tore strips of cloth and soaked them in cool water, placing them on the woman's forehead to bring down her fever. He found herbs in the kitchen that he recognized from his time learning folk medicine, and he brewed a tea that would help fight the infection in her lungs. He lifted her gently and helped her drink the tea, speaking softly to her, even though she was lost in the fog of her fever. As night fell and the stars appeared in the sky outside the window, Elijah kept his vigil. Rosie had fallen asleep on the floor beside the bed, wrapped in a blanket that Elijah had placed over her small body. And the woman in the bed continued to fight, her breathing shallow but steady, her fever slowly beginning to break. It was near midnight when her eyes finally opened. She looked up at Elijah with confusion in her gaze, trying to understand why there was a stranger sitting beside her bed. She tried to speak, but her voice came out as nothing more than a hoarse whisper. "Shh," Elijah said softly, reaching for the cup of water he had placed beside the bed. "Don't try to talk. You've been very sick. Here, drink this." He helped her take small sips of water, and as she drank, the fog in her eyes began to clear. She looked around the room and saw Rosie sleeping on the floor, and a tear slipped down her cheek. "My baby," she whispered. "Is she okay?" "She's fine," Elijah assured her. "She's the bravest little girl I've ever met. She found me in town and brought me here to help you." The woman closed her eyes, more tears escaping from beneath her lashes. "I don't understand. Who are you? Why would you help us?" Elijah was quiet for a moment, considering her question. "Because your daughter asked me to," he finally said, "and because it was the right thing to do." The woman opened her eyes and looked at him, really looked at him, and something passed between them in that moment. It was a connection that neither of them could explain, a recognition of two souls who had been searching for something without knowing what they were looking for. "I'm Sarah," she whispered. "Sarah Miller. Elijah Stone," he replied. "It's nice to meet you, Sarah Miller." Over the next few days, Elijah became a permanent fixture in the Miller household. He slept in the barn behind the house, refusing to leave until he was certain that Sarah W. as fully recovered. He chopped wood for their fire, fixed the broken step on the front porch, and taught Rosie how to whistle using a blade of grass. And slowly, day by day, Sarah got stronger. The first time she was able to sit up on her own, she insisted on cooking dinner for Elijah as a thank you for all he had done. He tried to refuse, saying that she needed to rest, but she was stubborn and would not take no for an answer. So he sat at her small kitchen table and watched as she moved around the room, still weak but determined, and he felt something shift in his heart. The first time she laughed, it was because Rosie had told a joke that made absolutely no sense but was delivered with such enthusiasm that neither adult could help but smile. And when Sarah's laughter filled the room, Elijah felt the walls he had built around his heart begin to crumble. The first time they really talked, was on a warm evening when Rosie had gone to bed and they sat together on the front porch, watching the stars come out one by one. Sarah told him about her husband, James, who had died 2 years ago in a farming accident, leaving her alone to raise their daughter and run their small homestead. She told him about the struggles she had faced, the loneliness she had felt, and the determination that had kept her going for Rosie's sake. And Elijah told her about his wandering, about the restlessness that had driven him from place to place, always searching for something he could never find. He told her about the family he had lost to illness when he was young, about the guilt he carried for not being able to save them, and about the fear he had of getting too close to anyone ever again. "That's why you helped us, isn't it?" Sarah said softly. Because you couldn't help them. Elijah was silent for a long moment, the weight of her words settling into his soul. Maybe, he finally admitted. Or maybe I was just tired of running. Sarah reached over and took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. Then stop running, she said simply. Stay. Elijah looked at her, at this woman who had shown him more kindness and understanding in a few short days than he had experienced in years of wandering. And he knew, with a certainty that surprised him, that he never wanted to leave. But he was afraid. He was afraid of opening his heart, afraid of losing someone again, afraid of the pain that came with loving and being loved. I don't know if I can, he whispered. I don't know if I know how to stay anymore. Sarah squeezed his hand gently. Then learn, she said. We'll learn together. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Elijah's life. He found work at the local ranch, earning enough money to buy supplies for the Miller household. He helped Sarah in the garden, planted new seeds, and fixed everything that needed fixing around the property. And every evening, he would sit on the front porch with Sarah and Rosie, listening to the little girl's saint stories about her day, and watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Rosie began calling him Uncle Eli, and then just Eli, and then one day, with the innocence that only a child possesses, she asked if he could be her new papa. Sarah blushed and tried to shush her daughter, but Elijah knelt down and looked into Rosie's eyes. Would you want that? He asked softly. Would you want me to be your papa? Rosie nodded, her eyes shining with hope. You make Mama smile, she said, and you make me feel safe. That's what papas do, right? Elijah's heart swelled with a love so pure and so unexpected that he could barely breathe. He looked up at Sarah, who was watching them with tears in her eyes, and he knew that this was it. This was what he had been searching for his entire life. This was home. He stood up and took Sarah's hands in his, looking into her eyes with all the love and hope and fear that lived inside his heart. Sarah Miller, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I came to this town with nothing but the clothes on my back and a restless soul that couldn't find peace. But then a little girl with tears in her eyes asked me to save her mama, and in doing so, she saved me. You saved me, both of you. Sarah's tears were flowing freely now, but she was smiling, a smile that lit up her entire face and made Elijah's heart soar. I don't have much to offer you, he continued. I don't have land or money or fancy things, but I have a heart that belongs to you, and I have a love that will never fade. If you'll have me, I want to spend the rest of my life making you smile. I want to be a father to Rosie and a husband to you. I want to build a life here, with you, in this place that feels more like home than anywhere I've ever been. Sarah reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his cheek. Elijah Stone, she said softly. From the moment I opened my eyes and saw you sitting beside my bed, I knew that God had sent you to us. You came into our lives when we needed you most, and you stayed. You stayed when everyone else turned away. That's all I've ever wanted, someone who would stay. Then I'll stay, Elijah promised, for as long as you'll have me, forever. Forever, Sarah repeated, and she rose up on her toes and kissed him, a gentle kiss full of promise and hope, and the beginning of something beautiful. Rosie cheered and clapped her hands, dancing around them in circles. Eli's going to be my papa. Eli's going to be my papa. And Elijah laughed, a real laugh that came from somewhere deep inside him, a place that had been dormant for far too long. He scooped Rosie up in his arms and pulled Sarah close, holding them both as the sun set over Silver Ridge and painted the sky in colors of gold and rose. The little girl who had run to him in tears had given him the greatest gift he had ever received. She had given him a family. She had given him love. She had given him a reason to finally stop running and star. Living. And as the first stars appeared in the evening sky, Elijah Stone knew that he was exactly where he was meant to be. He was home,